And our next speaker, which needs to go to the other side of the room, if you guys could let him know about that, Brian. So he's comes all the way to us from Louisiana. And he's a man who has been involved in writing state constitution of the state of Louisiana. He's been defending people in the courts of Louisiana, people's justice and rights. The framework of the law, folks, has been worked with him. He's been a practicing attorney for over 30 years. And he raised some questions about the income tax that he had to investigate. Actually, a friend turned him on to it. And the result of it is a story that you may find hard to believe, but it's true. The IRS tried to shut this man down and close him down and put him away, and the IRS failed. This man knows the law, he knows the U.S. Constitution and the income tax laws. He's a constitutional lawyer. Please help me give a warm hand of welcome to Attorney Tom Cryer.
Good afternoon. Well, that means that this mic is apparently working. Let me check my amen section back here. Can I get an amen over here? Okay, all right. We're ready to go, folks. Just had lunch. I know it's going to be difficult to stay awake, so I'm just going to talk loud. You know, I can be interesting or I can be loud. So I know how to be loud for sure. Can you crank this up a little bit, George? Just kidding. All right. I'm from Louisiana, and a lot of folks, you know, they make fun of Louisiana people because the Cajuns down there kind of talk kind of funny, and they talk about how, you know, they act like, you know, maybe the people from Louisiana are dumb. They're happy, and that's official. According to the ratings on happiness, Louisiana, people in Louisiana are happier than anywhere else in the country. And that's because of the Cajuns. Cajuns are happy people. Doesn't matter what's going on, they're going to make sure that they are happy, doesn't matter. And I love them for that, they're great, fantastic. But they boosted our numbers, and Louisiana's the happiest place in the country. But we're not stupid. You know, any state that will build a huge city 10 feet below sea level and fill it with Democrats, I don't think we can call that stupid. Now, earlier today, I heard Steve Hempling, who, by the way, is the #1 truth trooper. He's the first person to sign up for membership in Truth Tech. I heard Steve Hempling comment, he said, Tommy Cryer, going to come over here and give us 4 hours of material in less than an hour. And I told him, I said, look, I said, you know any Southern boy that can talk that fast? I want to see his birth certificate. I'm not buying it. Now, my story is not important. So we can cut that out. I did make the mistake of telling a friend of mine that I would find a law that made him liable for the income tax. And that good deed has been punishing me ever since. It's what's put me here. It's what changed my life. Destroyed one life, but you can't move on without leaving something behind. And I left my practice behind. They destroyed it. It was in wrecks. You know, they sent out agents to tell everybody, if this man's being investigated, you want to be caught up in an investigation, you keep doing business with him. Think that doesn't destroy? You know, of course, I stayed with them, second, third generation. Had money, didn't have money, I stuck with them anyway. But I thought that all that sort of thing was reciprocal. When it comes to the federal government, people are frightened. Doesn't that frighten you that we're afraid of our own government? Yes. Isn't that enough by itself to say something's wrong? You know, I do love this country. I love it more than I love life itself. Any veterans in here today? Oh, wow, great. Fellas, I don't want to embarrass anybody, but I want to ask you to stand up with me for just a second here. All right, I want you to join me in thanking these men for what they've done for this country. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, sir. You know, I have a special bond with veterans because I am one. I served as an officer in the United States Army, and I am just as close and I'm just as bonded with people who served in those support branches, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines. But you know, that bond doesn't come from just the fact that we were in uniform together. It doesn't come in just in fact that we shared an experience. It comes from the fact that we all, just like we all do love our country, veterans have gone a step beyond what most of us have done. These gentlemen that you just saw stand up, and I, have done something others haven't. In 1968, I wrote a check out to the United States of America, and I signed it and I handed it to them. I left the amount blank. These gentlemen have done the same thing. I left the amount blank, and I said, here's your check. Fill it out for a leg if you need it, and I'll give you my leg. Fill it out for an eyesight, for my eyes. I'll give you my eyes, and I'll learn to live blind. If you need it, fill it out for my life. I'll lay that down too. That's the kind of bond that only comes from a shared obligation like that, a shared sense of duty. And that's why veterans always hold a fond place in my heart. We love our country, all of us. That's how much I love my country. But there is something I love even more. I would not turn my back on my country to avoid pain. I would not abandon my country to save my life. But if I had to choose between my country and our freedom, I would not hesitate, because I love freedom that much more. Now, folks, I'm not talking about just freedom for me. You know, I'm going to cut loose and go to Panama, or I'm going to go here, or I'm going to whatever. I'm going to go find myself an island and to heck with everybody else. I'm talking about freedom for everybody, you, me. You know, I have to know, I want to know, I have to know that all of us are free. And that we as Americans have preserved and passed that freedom on to other future generations for all posterity. Now, I assume that most of you are aware of the government's abuse of the income tax law. And I'm not going to go there today. I'm not going to cite you a bunch of cases and a bunch of statutes. I'm not going to put a PowerPoint up here bouncing balls around and showing you that I'm right, they're wrong. That's not the point. But that's only part of the problem. Our federal government does not only use those ill-gotten gains to expand its power and its intrusion and its interference in our lives far beyond what was intended. It has actually been hijacked, taken over. Maybe a better word for that is embezzled by a host of banking interests primarily. You know, and in effect, an unholy marriage between big government and big money has been affected. And its family, such as military contractors, big business, even foreign countries, to our detriment. We the people, you and me, and all those 300 million Americans out there have been lulled, deceived into the illusion that we still control our government. But the steering wheel that we keep turning has been disconnected, like the kitty card in front of grocery stores. And if you're old enough to remember that, you're old. The nickel kitty card, that's all it did was this. But we turned the wheel and we thought we were driving, right? Well, that's where we are now. The steering wheel it's disconnected. You know, our representatives no longer represent our will. They merely obey the dictates of the forces and the influences that promise them more power and more wealth, both at the expense of our prosperity and at the expense of our freedom. During the 19th century and through much of the 20th century, America emerged, scraping a mere subsistence out of the dirt one minute, and 100 years later, a giant among the nations of the world. The reason that happened was because we were free. We were no different from Germans or Englishmen or Asians or Frenchmen or Italians or Africans, because we were all of those things. So why did we have a different outcome? Because we were free to innovate, free to excel, free to keep and reinvest the fruits of our labor and our ingenuity to produce independence and wealth. We didn't depend on anybody but ourselves and each other. And that's the definition of freedom. And freedom works. Freedom produced prosperity. Freedom produced independence, which are the means to be free. Unique to America was the middle class that emerged. People who weren't supposed to have money now had some degree of wealth and a comfortable standard of living, better than they needed to keep working, better than they need to keep serving us, the elite. And us, the elite, met in 1909, 1910, and by 1913, we had the Federal Reserve Act. We had the states kicked aside with the 16th Amendment. We had the income tax. You think that's a coincidence? You know, those behind the Federal Reserve and those that benefit from it have already overthrown our government, have overthrown our constitutional republic, and they've taken advantage of our false sense of security to convince us, because we want to believe, that our government has been unchanged, that things are still the same as they were back when America was prospering, but it isn't the same. Our nation now is being steered by these sinister seditionists for a dangerous precipice, one that once we go over will doom America to destruction, the loss of the American dream, and relegate us back to the status of a third world nation. Unless we wake the slumbering America, this huge giant that has only awakened a few times, and every time it has, it's taking care of business. I need only point you to history. If they don't wake up, these seditionists will succeed. Your children, your grandchildren will live the life of serfs, slaves, thralls. In this case, the enemy is not on some foreign shore. They're right here among us. The enemy has already invaded our nation. It's displaced our government of, by, and for the people. And wearing the mask of a republic, has established an occupation of our country by a ruling clique of megalomaniacal, power-crazed, and corrupted interlopers and pretenders. I was charged with tax evasion because I said, I'm not paying a tax unless you can show me that you are entitled to it by law. But somebody who had a mental state of intent to cheat can cheat on his taxes, and they make him Secretary of the Treasury. Now, don't tell me there aren't two classes of people in this country. Those on the inside and the rest of us. We got to wake up. Truth Attack, an organization of organizations, has undertaken that task of awakening the sleeping giant and putting the government back in its box, one tentacle at a time. Patriots throughout the country who see what's happened and where we're heading have struggled to awake the people, but we've been too disjointed. We're fragmented. We all calling out different things. We're making different messages. We're making different pleas to the public. And so the message is garbled because we're all doing something different, different page of the hymnal. It's not music, it's noise. And to make things worse, the big money controlled media has distorted and muted our message. So it's not getting out. By unifying the freedom movement, however, Truth Attack has become the choir director. And we're becoming more and more united, not only in mission, but in message. And we're starting to say things in unison. We're starting to promote and see some solidarity in the freedom movement. No longer am I a Second Amendment guy. I'm a freedom movement guy who specializes in Second Amendment. No longer am I a tax honesty guy. I'm a freedom guy who specializes in tax honesty. But as soon as we get that tentacle whipped, I'm ready to work on the next one. That's what we're seeing emerging now in the freedom movement, and it's exciting me. Now, Truth Tech has a comprehensive plan to call on America to rise up and reclaim it. And the oligarchy, our founding fathers, they have resources. We have none. You know, the oligarchy, rather, that our founding fathers feared. Not our founding fathers, the oligarchy. See, I'm like that poor guy. The other day I was in Gun Barrel City, meeting with Edwin Vieira, Brian Malatesta, some true heroes, real ones. And you know, I hear you're worried. I'm worried about the audience here staying awake right after lunch. It's the first time I saw an audience that was so dull it put the speaker to sleep. The poor guy was standing here, and all of a sudden he repeated himself 3 times, and then he just fell over and blopped. Now, you know, we still have well, he had locked his knees. He had locked his knees, and it made him pass out. But it did look like the audience had bored him to death. By unifying this movement, however, we'll start speaking with one voice. We'll start speaking the same message, and people will hear it if we can find a way to get it to them. Now, we still have the remnants of the structure of our Constitution. Not much. You know, we can still peaceably, lawfully turn this around. Granted, we don't have a lot, but we do have enough. The political in particular. Because until electronic voting takes over, what I call pre-programmed voting, we can still vote people out of office. We're the only nation in the world I know that every 24 months gets a chance to replace its entire House, and 1/3 of its Senate. Only nation in the world I know that has that every 24 months, and we don't do it. We keep voting for the same people, and we bitch because we don't get a different result. What did Einstein call that? You got it. But we've still got those remnants. Now, what scares me, you know, is that, and it comes down to us, the courts have crawled into bed with the executive branch and crawled into bed with the legislative branch. We don't have that. Our states were pushed aside by the 17th Amendment. They were pushed aside by many things that happened up until then, but that was a coup de grace. That was a blow of mercy that took them out of representation in the Congress. Even our bar has been bamboozled with the same myth that the public has been hit with, and they're a little bit cowed because the courts come down on them if they ever get out. I could cite you cases like that. You should have been in Florida when I argued before the Florida Supreme Court the other day. I didn't get a word out. Why? because I was defending a guy, an attorney, who they're wanting to disbar because he stood up and said, what law gives you the right to demand a tax or a return of my financial information of me? So we don't have those. It's up to us. That's what we have left. And we can do it, but it's going to have to happen. It's going to have to be done. Our third defense, the bar has been out. They're cowed. What scares me is that after that is gone, once we do lose that last thread that we have, our children won't have that remnant of constitutional structure. They won't have the possibility of a lawful and peaceful solution. They're only going to have two choices that we leave them, that our generation is going to give to them if we don't save this. Two choices. They could either submit to slavery and impoverishment, or they could die in a hopeless and bloody rebellion. Not a lot to leave your kids, is it? We cannot win a rebellion against this government. We do not have cruise missiles hanging over our fireplaces, unless some of you do. I saw one guy back there, he might, you know. Anybody here got cruise missiles? There he is. Go Davy, huh? Now, you know, but it is intact enough for us to do this. But if we fail to, you know, that's the fruits of our failure. We are in what I call a defining moment. Every civilization, every culture, every nation, every person has a defining moment. That time, that place, when what he does or fails to do defines him as a success or a failure, defines him as having done good or evil, defines him as having died or survived. The same goes throughout history. When Rome abandoned its republic and accepted rule by an emperor god, and when these emperors sought to purchase the loyalty of others by offering land to their soldiers and bread to their poor, the soldiers grew roots, refused to march. The poor sat idle, choosing to accept their poverty in exchange for sustenance. That was a defining moment for the Roman Empire. All had a choice. The Senate, the emperors, the soldiers, the citizens, they all played a part, and they all chose unwisely. This is our defining moment. This time we are in is just as much a defining moment as Bastogne was in the Battle of the Bulge in determining the outcome of World War II. That was Nazi Germany's defining moment. Every invasion, like the Normandy invasion, has to be prepared to survive the inevitable counterattack. In this case, that counterattack was carried out by the Germans' elite forces, the Waffen-SS, in a brilliant, almost insane plan to attack through the Ardennes where nobody dreamed that it would happen. And that thrust was an unqualified success. I say unqualified, almost unqualified. There was one fly in the ointment: Bastogne. Bastogne, little town, but 7 highways ran through that little town. When you've got troops 300 miles into enemy territory, like they did, They pushed a huge bulge, that's why they call it the Battle of the Bulge, cutting the Allied forces in half. It has succeeded in doing what it set out to do. But that doesn't work unless you can supply those forces up front. Bastogne was in the way. They could not get supplies, they could not get materiel up there to their invading, their counter-offending troops. Bastogne was held by the 101st Airborne. That's not Navy, by the way. That's what the general said. He told them to surrender, and he sent back one word: nuts. They held out. Now the problem was, at Bastogne, is that it was totally surrounded by enemy forces. They had to have it. The Germans were desperate to take Bastogne so they could resupply their front. Otherwise, it would cave in. All would be lost. But our troops were short of supplies. They didn't have medical equipment. They didn't have winter clothing, and it was a severe, severe winter that December. And they didn't have ammunition. They were running out. They were not only counting out rationing bullets, they were counting out bullets, not cases. Bastogne the next day would have fallen. They could not. You cannot click your enemy to death. Click, click doesn't get it. You know, it's not like in training where the guy was told, well, we don't have guns, we're giving you this piece of wood, this is a gun. You just point it and you say bangy, bangy, and the other guy has to fall down. So the guy gets up there and he jumps up and he says bangy, bangy, and the other guy doesn't fall down. He says bangy, bangy, and the other fellow says tanky, tanky. You know, those don't work in the real world, okay? Now the tanky, tanky guy probably made him an officer, you know, or at least a sergeant. But they didn't have anything. Now, providential intervention, perhaps. Dumb luck, perhaps. But the weather cleared. Blue skies allowed an airdrop into Bastogne. Because they couldn't drive over there. They were surrounded, remember? That big airdrop brought ammunition. It brought winter clothing. It brought medical supplies. It allowed the 101st to keep fighting. And they beat the Germans back. They stopped the Germans. And the Germans lost Bastogne, and they had to make a costly withdrawal because they couldn't supply that front. And it cost them 500,000 dead, wounded, and captured that were no longer there to defend the motherland. That defined the 101st. That defined Nazi Germany as a failed regime. That would have been different if the 101st hadn't had that kind of resolve. Nuts. Send that message back to your German general. And it wouldn't have happened. Even though they had all that resolve, it would not have happened without that airdrop, without all of that ammunition. This moment, this place and time where you and I are living today will define the future of this nation. America is going back. Yes, I didn't say America is going forward. I said America is going back. What we will define is what America goes back to. Is America going to go back to being free once again? Or is America going to go back to fascism? Or is it going to go back all the way to feudalism? We have people, just as you are here. You wouldn't be here if you didn't love this country. You wouldn't be here if it didn't matter to you. And you've got resolve. You're Americans. You're just like the 101st because that's what the 101st was made up of. We've got the same stuff the 101st had. Even our Navy people have the same stuff. I'm giving this guy a hard time. Now, many complain that Americans are apathetic, but that's not true, folks. I travel all over this country. In the last 2 weeks, I have been from across both coasts twice. I have been in the countryside, I've been in the big city. Over the last 3 years, I have been all over, I've stomped all over this woods, this big woods that we call America. They are not apathetic. They're concerned. They're worried about the direction our nation's headed. They see that it's headed towards socialism, fascism, totalitarianism. But they don't understand really what those words mean because they weren't taught that like I was in school. I'm an old fart, okay? I'll admit that. And what I wasn't taught in school, I went out and I found for myself. I was lucky in that regard. But the angst and the anger that I'm seeing in the public out there today hasn't been as high since, and here I'm going to date myself again, since the Cuban Missile Crisis. I haven't seen people this worried about the future of this nation as much as they were back then. But while they're concerned, they feel powerless. They think, I can't do anything. They don't understand that by doing nothing, they're doing exactly what totalitarianism asks of them. If you do nothing, that's all they say. It's real easy to be ruled. Just do nothing. Let us take care of it. We'll fix it so that we'll take care of the totalitarianism part. You can sit back and just not worry about a thing. So for God's sakes, what do we got to do? Don't do nothing. But they don't know what to do. They don't understand the problem. And they don't know what the solution is. They're paralyzed by fear and ignorance. Truth Attack's plan of action addresses both of those impediments by starting with the income tax issue, eliminating the primary source of intimidation and the government's chief instrument of terror, and by mounting a nationwide public education program to teach people about their rights and about the very restricted role that's been assigned to the federal government. Once the IRS no longer presents a threat of retaliation and reprisal, people are going to be a lot more likely to dissent, don't you think? They're going to be ready to rise up and help us take the second tentacle out and put it back in the box. The Federal Reserve, return to sound money, and secure our prosperity and prevent a continued engineered meltdown of the American economy. The third tentacle that Truth Tech has targeted is the abolition of the Federal Department of Education. I call it the No Child Allowed Ahead Department. Regaining our control of our schools and putting a halt to dumbing down of our children and the indoctrination of future generations. Our children, and many of those children are now in their 30s and 40s, have been taught a perverted version of freedom as being free from having to make decisions, free from being responsible for our own actions, free from being responsible not only for ourselves, but for our neighbors and even for our own family. That is the antithesis of freedom. And by getting the federal government out of our schools, we can restore our children's understanding of their rights as Americans and the responsibilities that come with those rights. From there, we'll proceed to dissolve the alphabet soup of federal agencies, the spawn of the IRS and the Fed, and stop the destruction to our states' rights and prerogatives, stop the intrusions into our personal lives by people who are from a distant and indifferent government. Sound familiar? We're back to being colonies. So their states have been relegated to status of colonies once again. We cannot have czars of any kind, shape, or description, not in America. Now, Truth Attack has several dozen projects, programs that need to be done in order to make all of this happen. We don't have the ammunition. We don't have the funding. We have the people, but we don't have the funding to make these things a reality. So what about Truth Attack? What the heck is Truth Attack? A lot of people out here, how many of you are Truth Attack members? And all the rest of you aren't yet. I hope you are after today. Truth Attack is a nonprofit political organization, but it's not a 501c3. You know, Americans may come in a lot of different brands and varieties. You know, we got a diverse assemblage of peoples, every size, shape, color, shape, description, and nationality, and religion, and origin, which is one of the things that makes us great. We're a tapestry. But there's one thing every one of us has in common. Americans do not lick anyone's boots. No 501c3 bootlicking for the Truth Attack. Now, we've got a lot of patriots that are members of Truth Attack, but we're also an organization of organizations. It consists of a coalition of a lot of different freedom-oriented organizations that are united and now are starting to show solidarity or determination to save our country from its government and our government from itself. It was founded in 2007 with the help of a half dozen tax honesty group leaders. Paymon, Steve Henfling were both there. Joe Bannister was there. I laid out the plan and they said, let's do it, and we're doing it. Right now, the coalition members, groups of the coalition, represent membership of a total of about 100,000 people. We got people, but they don't have bullets. Truth Attack's coalition and their allies include tax honesty groups, state rights groups, First Amendment groups, Second Amendment, gun rights groups, education groups, religious rights groups, local rule group, in the Fed groups, sound money groups, you name it. We're across the entire spectrum of freedom movement. The coalition continues to grow, and soon it'll include everyone, going after one bully at a time. Truth Attack and the rest of the freedom movement have been mischaracterized by the federal government as being opposed to the federal government. We do recognize the fact that the country is one thing and the government is another. The country is us, the government is our creature. But we're not anti-government. We are anti-federal government's continued expansion. We are anti-intrusion into our states, our banks, our highways, our classrooms, and our living rooms. And our mission is to rescue the government from its own excesses. We've trusted our government to those who would abuse it, and we've allowed it to go way too long without adult supervision. But just like a child, that you have to crack down on a spoiled child, and it's guarding its addiction to wealth and power, it's not an easy thing to do. We have to account for our neglect. We have to employ tough love in order to save this creature of ours. So Truth Attack's goal isn't anti-government, it's to save the government, to save it from itself. Just like with a drug-dependent child, you know it's going to fight every inch of the way. It doesn't want to give up its dependency. It doesn't want to give up its power. Power is more addictive than cocaine, heroin, or any other substance known to man. More corrosive, morally, ethically, spiritually. But after that battle is won, then both we and our government will be far more secure, and both of us will be a lot happier and have a healthier relationship with the other. Truth Attack has conducted a number of operations and projects that have taken us closer to that goal. Operation Stop Thief, beginning April 15, 2008, OST, Operation Stop Thief 1, was kicked off. And what it did was it allowed patriots, or caused patriots, or called for patriots to assemble in groups in front of post office branches across the country, holding up signs saying, "What income tax, truthattacks.org," and handing out flyers to the freshly blooded victims, letting them know that they'd just been scammed. In OST 1, Truth Attack, joined by a lot of other groups, including Ron Paul groups, libertarian groups, We the People groups, Constitution Party groups, you name it. It came from everywhere. All we did was say, we need help us do this, and they came running. It was wonderful. We put people in front of over 700 post offices. My threshold for that project was 100. If we could do 100, then we'll do it again next year. We did over 700. Last year in OST 2, we put groups in front of over 1,200 post offices and handed out over 2 million flyers. Now OST 3 should be bigger, right? But we're not going to have an OST 3. Truth Attack is broke. We don't have the money to ship out those signs and flyers. We're just merely going to have to urge our groups to go and make up signs for Truth Attack with this message and go to all of these rallies that are being held across town, across the country, and spread our message there. We're having to inhale. We've been exhaling for a long time. And we really got our heads handed to us financially in Florida, although it was a huge success, the patient died type thing. Financially, we got devastated. Now, I'll tell you about that in a minute. Truth Attack mini seminars. How many have been to one of the one-day mini seminars? Was it worth going to, folks? Well, about an amen section over here. Okay. That's where we lay out the whole plan in detail. That's the 4 hours material I was supposed to give you in 1 hour. We're educating the concerned public of what can be done about it, and we're letting them know that they have the power to make a difference. And we use these for the host group to serve as a fundraiser for them. We don't charge a penny. As a fundraiser for them, and as a membership builder for them, we conduct these, and we've done it all over the country. You know, we've been to here, we've been to Sacramento, San Jose, Fremont, Los Angeles. We've been to Thousand Oaks, I think, once here in California. We've also been to Detroit, Chicago, Minneapolis, Denver, Baltimore, Philadelphia, Cleveland, Austin, Dallas, Houston. Last week or a couple of weeks ago, Steve Heffley and I went to Memphis and put one of those on with Bernie Kugelin. These things are making a difference. Tea Party Squared. We recognize the fact that Tea Party is a fantastic phenomenon. It's fantastic to see people starting to say, hey, I'm mad and I'm not taking it anymore. Okay, well, what's your issue? Well, what are you promoting? Well, what do you think ought to be done? I'm mad. I ain't gonna take it anymore, though. Now, bless their hearts, I love them, each and every one of them. And so we set out to we're gonna start one state at a time, and we're gonna teach them what's wrong. We're gonna teach them how to be citizens again, the lost art of citizenry. We're gonna teach them about the inside. And a lot of people don't know about the inside of politics. It works completely different from what you and I think about because we're capitalists. But politics isn't capitalist. It works on a different scale. And so in order to manipulate politicians, you have to know what moves politicians. And we're teaching that. And it was a fantastic deal. The good news is a companion book that goes with that. George was there. He had one of the most interesting segments on using the internet as a tool of politics. But the companion book that went with that has all the little inside secrets of politics and tricks of the trade and where to learn and how to teach and how to apply pressure in 15 different ways we had a whole bunch of them left over. So we're selling those on the Truth Attack website in the store. You can get that book there. Now, this was so threatening, such a promising project, that the federal government at the last minute used one of its interlopers to launch a smear and fear campaign. And against me, against Truth Attack, against coalition groups and the people who were supporting this project. And that's what wrecked it. Up until then, it was promising to be a huge success for the Truth Tea Parties and Republican Liberty Caucus and all these other groups that we were trying to back up. And they were going to do it again, but it broke us. It took every penny I had, took every penny Truth Attack had. Well, you live and learn. We get up, dust ourselves off, and we hit it again. Nuts. Nuts. That's what I said when I get down like that. Now, we got other projects that are waiting in the wings. They're at the door, actually. They're standing at the door. They're ready. They're linked up to the cable. They're ready to jump. But I'm not going to make them jump without any bullets going out. They can't go bangy on their way down. Operation Trojan Horse. Joseph Bannister. You all know Joe Bannister. Absolutely, absolutely. .999 integrity. My hero. One of the few men that I admire and look up to as though I'm not even worthy to be in his presence. Joe Bannister conducted his own investigation. He expected, just as I did, to debunk these tax honesty claims, and he found out, as I had, that they were not bunk, that they're true. And he confronted his supervisors, who told him, you'll either go back to work and continue without any questions or discussion, or you can resign. He resigned, gave up his career. Now, Joe has cut a powerful video appeal. He's already cut it. It's been done. To his former colleagues, urging them to conduct their own investigations and challenging them to remember their oaths as well. And we're working on getting that finalized down to a final form of a DDD that we want to send to every one of the Internal Revenue Service's 100,000 employees. And we're going to do that just as soon as we get the funding. I'll give you a little insight in this, and this may run a little over because it's not part of the presentation, but I think you'd be interested in hearing this. When I first proposed this or asked Joe what he thought about it, he said, well, probably not worth it. I said, how come? He says, well, he said, you do good to get it to 40% of the 100,000, to get them to actually, look at it. I said, okay. And he says, and of those, probably only 10% would really give it a serious look and find out. And he said, of those 10%, only 10% would have have what it took to walk away. And I said, Joe, let's run your numbers. You got 100,000, 40% is 40,000. 10% of 40,000 is 4,000. 10% of that is 400 agents walking out on the IRS, one right after the other. I said, you've been waiting for somebody to come out the door behind you. Here's 400 of them lined up. Now, what a project. We need to do it. Continuing legal education seminars. We need to employ the bar. We need to let them know. Larry B. Kraft and I and a couple other attorneys are putting together a seminar for continuing legal education. Lawyers are punished for being lawyers, if it makes you feel any better. We have to sit through 2 days every year of sheer torture in little chairs, these stacked chairs like this, listening to the most boring lectures from the most boring people they can find. Well, lawyers are always looking for something else, some other way to get their continuing legal education requirement done. We want to put something out there in front of them that teaches them how they can actually make money defending people in tax cases, how they can actually profit. Is baiting lawyers with money legal or moral? Well, I say, who cares? If we get lawyers to know the truth, judges aren't going to be able to just act like that isn't the law when they know that the lawyer standing there knows better. You change reality when you change perception. We need a coordinated and supported legal defense, scores of people, and you can name some of them. Erwin Schiff, Lynn Meredith, Sherry Jackson, almost Tom Cryer, are going to prison for no other crime other than to learn the truth and to dare to confront the federal government with its illegal activities. And they're being sent to prison for that. We have to beef up our defense of these people. I believe, and others agree with me in the legal community of the tax honesty movement, that we need a defense central, a support unit that provides support, research, brief writing, motions, for defense attorneys. Not just people like Larry B. Kraft and Jeff Dickstein and John Green and others that are in this area, but for PDs and for people who's never seen a tax case before. Public defenders are serious about defending, they don't know how. And then when they get into a tax case, they find out, whoa, what's the matter with this judge? What, who in the world did something bad in his oatmeal? You know, so we need something like that. But it's not going to happen, of course, without funding. We want to wake up to America, right? So we're going to holler at them. Nothing's coming out. We don't have a voice. How are we going to wake them up? Liberty Works Radio Network is the voice of freedom. It's struggling to pay bills day to day. We cannot wake this country up without a voice. Right now it's operating as one affiliate, and it's operating across the internet. And we've got a wonderful show for Truth Attack every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday from 5 to 6 Eastern. And they've got a brilliant host. He's not too good looking, but it's radio, you know. So, you know, they have a plan to use translators, boxes. You're kidding me. Wow. I'm halfway through. I've just been given, I didn't get the 20 or the 10 or the 5, Jack. Where was my 20? Okay, I didn't see it. All right, folks, I'm taking way too long here. What I'm hoping that I've gotten across to you so far, and we're going through, we've got to stop the bleeding. We've got to take care of the income tax issue first. First aid says first stop the bleeding. If you look at all the benefits that we would get from that, general public, the economy would just boom. It would actually explode. States would no longer be dependent upon the federal government. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Nobody would be without work. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? People would have more money coming into their household every week, not every 3 years with a rebate. Every week, money they earn, not money somebody gave them. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Federal government would get all its money back, but it's other 80 taxes. Good thing, bad thing? Bad thing. All right. We have a lot of these tactical deals going on, but something's got to happen to spark this movement of angst and anger across the country and to direct it. The current strategy is to ignore it out of existence. And do you think that these people who thought they could do nothing and they got up on their hind legs and they yelled and they screamed, they said, I'm mad, I'm not taking it anymore, and nothing happened, and they give up and they go home, do you think we could ever get them to stand up again? That's why today is it. Now, this is our last opportunity. This is it. We are in our defining moment. Question is, will we rise to the occasion? 3 years ago, I stood before you and I accepted the role as a spearhead for the movement. I accepted that. I asked you to help me, though, by providing the thrust behind me. And you did. And we won. We won. That needs to happen again. Now, though, it's not me that needs the help. And it's not spear. It's Truth Attack, and it's a tank. And so I'm here, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to put my pride aside, I'm asking you to help fuel and help arm that tank that is Truth Attack. And I'm not just asking you for a few dollars. I'm asking for each of us to give all we can. I give all I have. I give all my time, my energy, my skills. Every penny I can lay my hand on goes to Truth Attack. My last thought, my last breath will be for this movement. I'm not asking you to write a blank check for your leg or for your eyesight. I'm not asking you to write a blank check for even for your life. All I'm asking is that you join me by giving all that you can today. Give till it hurts and then give some more. Because if we don't defeat this enemy, and we don't do it now, then it's going to hurt a whole lot worse later. And it's not just going to hurt us. It's going to hurt our children, our grandchildren, and generations to come forever. The cost of victory pales in comparison to the cost of defeat. Give all you can stand. Please, that's what I'm asking. Now, fortunately, a hotel was very thoughtful. We're a very thoughtful bunch here at the Hilton. And they provided these support collection devices. And I want to ask you to pass these back through the crowd. And I'm asking for you to contribute all that you can stand to do, folks, because this is our last shot. This one needs to go both sides in here, I guess. I know we get the iron put on you a lot. I get the iron put on me a lot. And I tell them I've already given everything, but here's some more. And I know I'm asking a lot to come up here and tell you about this stuff and then say, hey, here's my handout. I don't do it often, but we're in need, and I'm losing my country, and I'm losing my freedom, and yours along with it. And I already told you how much I love this country, and I already told you how much I love freedom. And the one thing that I truly believe is that you feel the same way. So with that, I'll just say, God bless you each and every one. Thank you for your attention. God bless these states of America united. And God bless and preserve our freedom. Thank you.